Great. Welcome, everybody.
So I probably have about 12 or 15 minutes of just some general comments that I might like to make, and then we can open it up. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
My name is Sarah Lloyd, and my husband and I dairy farm outside of the Wisconsin Dells. We are conventional dairy farmers. We run 1,000 acres of land and milk 350 cows 3 times a day. We have 6 or 7 employees, and it's my husband, his brother, and my father-in-law that are the principal operators, and all of the associated spouses work off farm to get health insurance. My mother-in-law doesn't work, she has her own business, but for myself and my brother-in-law's wife, one of the principal reasons of working off the farm is to bring health insurance back to the family. So for farm families and any self-employed business person, that's generally an issue. And I can talk a little bit more about how it's especially difficult for farm families with health insurance and why that's a shared value that we have with all Wisconsinites. I was recently elected to be a interim co-chair of the board of Our Wisconsin Revolution. I have been active in this kind of trying to get the organization off the ground, so it's super exciting to see a great turnout of this committee, and thanks to everyone for all the work that you're doing. And yeah, let's make sure that we have lots of great gatherings like this all across the state. So that's the plan. But what first I want to point out, a lot of times we hear about the rural-urban divide, and I'm going to insist that we start talking about the rural-urban continuum, because I think that it is a more positive framing of the situation, and I also think that I'm sure all of us could name some connection that we have to rural places, and people that live in rural places all can name a connection to the urban. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we're really connected in a continuum, and even an example of something I took part in a couple weeks ago that was kind of a fun connection of the rural and the urban that maybe we could even think about as a group doing more of. But I think we have couple opportunities for working on the continuum or along the continuum is that agriculture provides some really unique connection opportunities between people, because raise your hand if you ate something today. So, as the great poet Wendell Berry says, eating is an agricultural act. And so there is a physicality of agricultural products that everyone experiences, and that's a place that has an opportunity to not divide people, because we're all connected into it. So for you sociologists out there, I am a sociologist by training. I think the mechanical solidarity that can be created through following the supply chains of agricultural products, by the trade routes, how does this stuff move around, is really an opportunity. I passed around a little 2-page handout. I think there's some more up here on the table. This is just something that I did for a session we did at the Wisconsin Farmers Union annual convention, and I just did a summary of the sort of going public explanations of what the heck happened in the last election, especially, what's the matter with Kansas, what's the matter with Sauk County, Wisconsin, what's the matter with Pepin County, Wisconsin, and, Cathy Kramer, who's one of ours here from UW, kind of as an academic hit the jackpot by sort of predicting or having a good explanation for what went on in the election, and her book was published long before Trump was elected. But I think, she does do a good job of summarizing some of what I certainly believe is true in the rural areas, and something that we should think about is that rural people are feeling like they're getting the short end of the stick. They feel like they're not being heard, and importantly, not being respected, and that they're not getting their fair share of public resources. Now, we can debate whether or not, if you analyzed the numbers, if that's actually true, but this is the perception that many rural communities have. And I think when we think about the book, What's the Matter with Kansas, does everyone know the premise of What's the Matter with Kansas? The book by Thomas Frank. You know, it's basically, well, I'm not probably doing him justice, but, you know, he basically says, oh, people vote against their own interest. Yeah. Which I would like to say right now, no, people do not vote against their interests. They vote the way they see their interests. And so that is extremely important, because one of the things that Nick and I were joking about the other day is, you know, you've all heard about mansplaining. Well, there's a certain amount of herb-splaining that goes on. And I mean, I have lived in urban areas, I have lived in rural areas. You know, it's not fair to sort of make these arbitrary geographic divisions between who's telling who what. But I think that we could be sensitive to there's a certain amount of herb-splaining that goes on.
We're going to copyright that, by the way.
And, you know, I think we should be sensitive to that. But in this sheet, I've got a little summary of Cathy Kramer's book, obviously very brief. Very brief summary of Arlie Hochschild's Strangers in Their Own Land, which is, she did a sort of deep dive with some Tea Party voters in Louisiana. And she really, I think, challenges the What's the Matter with Kansas premise of, you know, no, people are not voting against their own interests, because people don't do that. They are voting how they see their interests. And that's really important. I had to do J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy. I heard he just had a New York Times piece that someone said was good. I haven't read it, but actually, if you have not read the last article, it's a Politico article that came out right after the election. It's a deep dive into Pepin County, Wisconsin, and I actually really. The article is very good in the sense that you really hear the voices of the people that the reporter talked to, and he gives them some space to explain the complexity of their understanding of the situation. But the reason that I like the article so much is that it exemplifies this mechanical solidarity that I think is an opportunity for us when we're thinking about how can we all, as Wisconsinites, work together for the common good. And this woman that's in Pepin County, and she's she is a Democrat, and she says, I'm a Democrat. She is she has sheep. And she talks about the day after the election watching her neighbor that she buys hay from walking up the driveway, and she's like, doesn't know what to do with her face, because she knows he voted for Trump, and she's just completely freaked out, and she doesn't know what to do. And the reporter later on says, well, I mean, why, Bob, just don't talk to him anymore if it's that much of a problem for you. And she's like, no, I mean, I have to talk to him. And he's like, well, why? She said, well, I buy my hay from him. And so the reporter says, well, just buy your hay from somebody else. And she's like, no, I have to buy my hay from him. And I have the quote on the last line there. It's beautiful hay, it's dry, it's grassy, it's got just a little bit of clover in it, and it's beautiful, it's perfect. So that to me exemplifies an opportunity. This is a physical transaction that these people have together, and that's the opportunity I think we have in agriculture and our connection between farmers and eaters. And especially in Wisconsin, where we still actually produce a diversity of products. We are on the forefront of the United States in connecting local, like the local and regional food system. We really are. I travel around the country talking to people about what we're doing here in Wisconsin because other people want to know, because we are rebuilding the food system to be more connected, work better economically for family farmers, make sure that healthy food is accessible and affordable. I mean, these are all things that we got a lot of work to do on, but we're working on it. And I feel like these are very positive places to be working around having food together, eating, making sure people are nourished. Like, to me, that is the opportunity. Now, I know that we're here, you guys are concentrating on healthcare, and certainly, when we think about trying to find shared values, I think an opportunity is in this agricultural thing. Let's build up the relationships that we have with people around something that is positive and is good. We have a lot of opportunities, and we have a lot of work to do on lower income communities and urban areas that are having issues with accessing healthy and affordable food. But that's a way of sort of broadening the coalition of people, of interested people, to work together on the broad range of issues that we want to work on. But I think that focusing activities around positive things like eating good food together and figuring out how to get the good food in an economic way that supports the farmer that produced it and all the people in the supply chain to the eaters and to the communities, that is a project that needs a lot of work but can be extremely positive from a social and an economic and an ecological perspective. So to me, that's like a great opportunity. With regards to healthcare in general, Wisconsin Farmers Union, you may remember the tractorcade during the Act 10 protests. So Wisconsin Farmers Union, along with Family Farm Defenders, and a couple other groups, we organized the tractorcade. And one of the actual biggest issues that we were working on was the issue of BadgerCare, and the fact that it was going to get slashed in the budget, in Walker's budget. And we actually, Wisconsin Farmers Union has a lot of difference. We are a nonpartisan organization, and we have to be quite careful because we do have members that will get on the phone and tell us that we're straying too far, into the capital P partisan, or capital P politics, as I call it. It was partisan politics. And we were very clear with the BadgerCare issue. We estimated that there were 11,000 farm families in Wisconsin that were using BadgerCare at that time. I don't have an updated number because obviously they've diminished the way that people can have access to it. But at that time, we knew that we estimated there were 11,000 farm families that would be impacted by having reduced access to BadgerCare. We also know that for young farmers who are just starting out, trying to get into farming, having access to healthcare is it's a hard thing. It impacts their ability to start their businesses. So having young farmers have access to some kind of healthcare is really important. So that was our interest. But I think what we are learning in the Cathy Kramer and the Arlie Hochschild is that there's this resentment. How do you work on this abstract concept of resentment? Because for whatever reason, people are developing an attitude that it's a zero-sum game. That if somebody gets something, if some group of people get something, and maybe if those urban people get all those benefits, then I automatically am going to lose something, that it's always a zero-sum. And I think that by concentrating on some shared values and maybe going to the core of Wisconsin's history of a cooperative-based economy, we're here in a co-housing unit, that's good. How can we rebuild people's experience with cooperative and collaborative processes that don't mean that if somebody gets something, then I have to worry that I'm losing it. And that's something that, again, we can't have like a teach-in and be like, I'm going to tell you about how you shouldn't think this is zero-sum. I mean, I think It's really, we need to just start building our relationships with people, find places that we can work in common. I brought with me, we don't have a current healthcare fact sheet from the Wisconsin Farmers Union, but I brought some of the other ones that I think will sound very familiar to you as mostly urban folks. Investing in good education in public schools. We do a lot of work on rural education, but making sure that public education in Wisconsin is providing fair and equal access to all people in Wisconsin. Shared value. Groundwater, clean water, very important for farmers, very important for urban people, very important for Wisconsinites. Water. I mean, when you're out there anywhere, urban or rural, people get it. We cannot mess around with our water. So, you know, this is a place to build relationships, to build shared values. Nonpartisan redistricting is a very big issue for rural voters and for Wisconsin Farmers Union members. Rural voters are feeling disenfranchised. We're stuck in a lot of vast, very red districts that are not creating competitive elections there, and because of that, the issues don't actually really get talked about. Rural broadband is a very big issue for us. I know that if you're living in a city, you probably have better options, but I'm sure they're not great because the U.S. in general has high costs for relatively slow speed. We also have these issues coming up of net neutrality, things like that. But rural broadband is something that people get, like, yeah, people should at least have access to education and information. As a business owner, I have to do my payroll taxes online. I have to go and look at the markets. I have to look at the weather. I really have I have no option for high-speed broadband internet at my home, and I'm 5 miles from the downtown Wisconsin Dells, and there's no choice, no choice. So, you know, I bring those up, and I brought copies of it just to think about, you know, are there issues to maybe start building relationships around? And yeah, we may not agree on all the issues, but let's build it up on the issues that we know that we can find common ground on. And that would really be my suggestion. And someone in all groups, like, we do have to watch for herb-splaining. And I'm not trying to privilege rural people, because I'm sure that there's certainly rural splaining that goes on too. But, you know, I think from the perspective of our Wisconsin Revolution, I know that I am involved in my Columbia County area local chapter, and we're actually bringing people in from Adams County and Marquette County because they don't have a separate local chapter at this point. And, you know, a lot of the people that I'm bumping into in that space are people that have actually not been politically active their whole entire life, and they got excited about Bernie Sanders and they want to do stuff, but their experience with political action is probably very much different than a lot of people in this room who, you know, you might consider yourself a lifelong political activist. Like, that's kind of what you do and have done, and there's nothing, that's great, it's wonderful, but I think when we're thinking about, even at our Wisconsin Revolution level, we've got a big space between what people's experience has been on organizing and being active, and so that's, you know, that's another thing to think about as we're designing and thinking about our meetings and, you know, what we're planning for actions, so that we can make sure that there's a lot of on-ramps for people to be involved, and a lot of on-ramps for people to share what they know and be where they're at. And that isn't an urban-rural thing necessarily. But obviously Madison historically has kind of been a hotbed of political action, so you guys are all really good at it. And so, you know, I hope that you can share with each other and with people across the state about what you're learning and how to be active, but also meeting people where they are. But I will I threw a lot of ideas out, but I do think that building mechanical solidarity and building relationships around actual physical food and agricultural products is an opportunity because it's a positive thing. And then I think building relationships around issues and ideas that we know we share in common, healthcare being one of them, but how do we talk about it in a way that doesn't trigger the zero-sum impulses that have been very well trained into people? I mean, that's a framing, that's a deliberate framing to divide and conquer. So we have to kind of deprogram ourselves and our neighbors about that zero-sum thing. And that's I think we need to be strategic and deliberate about the way that we talk about things. So we aren't automatically triggering the tendency for people to jump to the zero-sum conclusion. And that's, you know, we just have to work on that and think about it, how we're talking about things.